Hi, my name is Patricia, and we're GygesEthics. We are a WordPress forum and YouTube channel that seeks to engage students all across the internet in a discussion about ethics and current affairs. This is...
Hi, I'm Will. I have not yet been introduced.
Yeah, I'm Casey.
So basically, Patty and I already made an introduction video, but we're going to be four throughout the episodes. This is the first episode. We're four freshmen in the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. And we will start today. It's going to be our first video, so it's sort of under experimentation. But the first topic we're going to talk about is going to start out from a general discussion that is happening in Europe, the European Union, as austerity is taking place in most countries, especially in Greece, Italy, and Spain, about the eventual implementation of the patrimony tax. Now, the patrimonial tax is a tax that affects still capital. Unlike most types of taxes, which either affect income or property, like houses and infrastructure, this tax goes and hits directly savings and deposits by individual citizens in a country. We will then extend this discussion to a general overview of what the right and ethically most justified function for taxes are from a state's perspective. Is the state justified or not, or at least to what extent, in using taxes as a mean to level society economically, bridge among inequality, or level in a forceful way classes in society. The aforementioned tax has been also called in England as the Robin Hood tax. Now, as austerity is kicking in after the end of the recession in Europe, we see that states are now facing this ideological question. Are we going to use, Cameron and Monti are also thinking, are we going to use these kind of taxes as a way to level our societies as we're needing capital to raise tax revenue? Now, I will encourage any one of you to start the discussion. What are your opinions on this? Do you think that these patrimony taxes are justified in a state function perspective?
So we're going to do this so that
Yes.
we don't talk over each other. So I'll start off. I think that it's a problem sort of generally to tax savings accounts, because that's where people put so much of their money into retirement accounts, into college funds for their children, and that's sort of generally that's a bad idea in the first place. Also, it's a problem in the financial market because although it would encourage investment in the financial system and the stock market and everything, it discourages investment in a lot of other areas that I think are important. I'm just going to start with that, and Patty.
Well, I think that what you mentioned is perhaps correct, that a patrimony tax would take out from savings funds and retirement accounts, whatever. But ideally, if the patrimony tax goes into the government and the government is able to have the funds to support a welfare system that can take care of retirement, so pension funds and general welfare, then the patrimony tax is justified.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on that. Just I know we didn't want to go too far into welfare, but just to pick up on that, I think it's probably better overall for people to have at least their own retirement funds separate from pensions, because you've seen in Greece the whole pension thing has been a problem. And I think it's just sort of a basic right to be able to have your own money and to be able to have control over that, because although most people would admit that some of it has to do with luck, you did work for that, you did earn it, and you should have some control over that, be able to leave some to your children and everything. Okay.
Yes, of course, I understand that argument, and I think that, yes, we should not let this discussion go into welfare too much. Of course, what Patty mentioned is valid. If a country raises taxes, but at the same time the state is able to maintain for all of the society services that guarantee what that capital would have then been used by individual citizens, it guarantees an egalitarian structure in the country while standardizing standards of living across the board. But the point here is, most precisely, is it okay, beyond the services that a state should offer, whether those services will be offered by the state directly or by private entities, that's another question. Is it legitimate for central authority to level classes? Should classes be leveled? Should people who are richer forcefully made poorer, or not poorer, but at least go down to a level where the majority of the population is? This is the discussion. My opinion is, in particular, that the priority is that everyone has access to the same opportunity in life, whether it's education, whether it's enrichment, professional enrichment, academic enrichment, travel, culture, and so on. These rights should be guaranteed by everyone, but then the opportunity in a free market society should be guaranteed by a state entity. Too often, money equals opportunity, and it is essential in an ideal state that I envision for the state to ensure that opportunity goes beyond the capital in the bank.
I think you're very right that very often in the free market society that we live in, money creates opportunity, and what the state should seek to do is create equity, which is equality of opportunity. One of the philosophers we studied in our political and social thought class, Rawls, believed that he was an egalitarian. So he believed that in the arbitrariness of fortune, so the fortune that we have, so where we were born, our luck, everything was determined by our luck. So our socioeconomic status, the wealth of our parents, what kind of education we get, etc., that's determined by something that's random chance. I know there's an element of hard work, and that's what we believe in, especially here in America, that hard work can get you anywhere. But there is always, and you can't deny, an element of chance, of fortune, and that's what the state should seek to level and to create that equality of opportunity for those who were born for those who weren't lucky enough to be born in the richest family, or for those who are born in the richest family to be kind of leveled.
So,
Of course, yeah.
all right. In the leveling of classes, when you're causing lower classes and upper classes to be lowered and lower classes to be raised until it's sort of a middle class, like a general middle class, you sort of get into this arbitrary situation where you don't have an upper class to fund the things that we rely on, we don't think about, like philanthropy. You're going to get rid of those sorts of things. If everyone's middle class, then there will be no extra to fund new forms of technology and progressivism, even for things like environmentalism. You're going to remove those types of things unless you rely on the government, which you can if you want, like the EPA to be extended into environmental technology, which would be a wonderful thing. But if you're going to get rid of if you're going to get rid of the lower and upper class, or try to, social catalysts using tax to do that, you're going to be getting rid of lots of philanthropic funds that are going to help that progressivism.
Of course, I agree.
It's my turn.
I'm sorry.
You can pay attention, Miguel. I love you.
I'm really sorry.
It's okay. It's fine. Don't worry about
Go
it.
on.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Will was saying about sort of the upper tax brackets being responsible for a lot of things in society. The upper tax brackets, and don't quote me on this, are responsible for something. Just the top 1% is responsible for something like 60% of the tax revenues in the United States, which is huge. And without that, if you kind of if they don't have that disposable income that the government can tax, then the government has a lot less revenue. And there's a lot of money invested into business, into technology, and a lot of money put into philanthropy that I think is really important. But the fundamental issue in this, for me, is that I think the government exists to protect its citizens. And that's basically its only job. And I think some of that protection isn't just military, isn't just police, is a certain amount of welfare. Is that providing education for all of its citizens, and not just education, but good education, and that needs to be well funded. But that anything beyond that is totally out of bounds. I think that if the government is raising taxes to provide more money for education, which I think they absolutely should do, that's great. But if they're taxing to level everything, if they're taxing just to make the rich poorer, then I think that falls out of their boundaries of protecting the citizens, and that they shouldn't do it.
sorry for the previous interruptions. All I wanted to do was to now raise another question for you guys. Basically, we see that our vision of what state function should be relies on a fundamental premise that we diverge on. Are we entitled to, and this rings many bells, are we entitled to the property, luck, economic and social status we come into life with? Are we entitled to the talents we have? Or are we already entitled with what our family acquired before us? That will then determine whether the state is justified in taking that away from us if necessary, or give us more if not. That would be a more Marxist or neo-socialist or neo-socialist progressive vision. A more libertarian vision, which implies that we are automatically entitled to what we're born with, or that there's nothing that indicates that we're not. Or a way in between that is generally considered egalitarianism should be an egalitarianism of opportunity, which is also what KC hinted at by suggesting welfare in fields like education. What do you think?
Okay, so I think that what we've kind of been talking about with Rawls is really relevant here, that you are absolutely not entitled to what you come into the world with. I don't think that. I think it's, like Patty was saying, it's a lot of luck. But also, like Rawls says, you shouldn't be, punished for it. I think that, ideally, in my opinion, ideally things like education and healthcare, there'd be a basic minimum that everyone would have, and that would be available to everyone regardless. It would be better if we could put more money into public schools so that a lot of people who had more money wouldn't feel like they had to get their children to private schools because they were better. I know where I live, I'm not going to say that on this, there's a real problem in the public school system. There are a lot of public schools that really aren't good. There were some cheating scandals recently with teachers changing answers on tests and things like that. And a lot of people don't want their children in those schools, and so the people who have more money do put their children in private schools for better education. And ideally, that wouldn't happen. That no one would need to do that. The public school system would be better than it is. But I think that right now, that that's not the way it is, and that you should have the ability, if you have the funds, to put your children into a private school. I think that, things like waivers and everything are a really good idea. But, we don't live in an ideal world. And I think to take the opportunity away from some people, even if it's just a little bit of opportunity, it doesn't actually give the people who have less more of an opportunity. You're just sort of taking that money away. I don't think it really matches up to a purely egalitarian system in our imperfect society.
I think, of course, the society we live in is imperfect, but if we take that attitude that, oh, everything's imperfect, so let's just keep going with the way we are to benefit those that are better off, because, hey, why not? I think that we have to seek that ideal. Basically, we're here on Earth to better ourselves, to make humanity better than it is. And I think that fundamentally that betterment includes equality and making sure, not just equality, but equity, that everyone has equal opportunity. Rawls, his principles of justice are one, that everyone have, the equality principle is that everyone have equal liberties and basic fundamental rights. And then his second one is the difference principle, which is that he accepts that there are differences between people, that the arbitrariness of fortune or that luck that we don't really deserve, we don't really deserve our initial status, our initial position in the world. He says that those things that we don't deserve, like natural skills, so that I'm better at playing piano, or I'm better in investing in stock markets, whatever. Those natural skills should be put to the benefit of all, especially to those that are least well off. So those that are disabled, the old, the young, all of the natural skills and natural socioeconomic benefits that I have, I should put to the benefit of that, of the worst off. And if I'm going to put my benefits to the benefit of the worst off, then that would include me not lowering what I have or lowering my opportunities, but raising theirs, so working for their betterment. It's not necessarily lowering myself. On the contrary, it's just raising others up.
So we see that here there's a big difference in perspective, especially this last statement showed it. Now basically it seems that you guys are going towards another issue, which is basically we live in a nature, we live by nature, and nature is arbitrary. The way fortunes are assigned, whether it's skills or whether it's wealth, is often arbitrary when we come into the world. Now the question is, what should we do? Is the state the entity that should ensure that this sort of arbitrariness is taken away? Humans fight through cultural progress, is commonly believed, against their human instincts in many instances. Is this a human instinct that we have to fight against? Second of all, where is the line? How much should we fight into the wealth or the luck that we're given when we're born? And where is the line that determines what goes into our identity? If we take everyone's skills and we put them in a common pool, are we making everyone equal? And is that justified? There are many lines. What are your opinions?
Okay. So I think that it's sort of difficult to take this idea from Rawls of using your skills to better everyone, because I think that for a lot of people that's something you sort of think is as an inherent part of yourself. It's something that's essential to who you are, and it's sort of difficult to think of that as belonging to everyone. So I think that's just sort of a general issue that we need to sort of talk about. But I just wanted to say that I think that society isn't perfect, and I agree with Patty that we should try to make it perfect, but I think that that change is part of other parts of the system. I think we could better make our society perfect by changing parts of the system that are not taxes. We'll just move on, because that was sort of relevant now.
In this Robin Hood tax, you have to consider that it is a form of welfare. You said you wanted to stay away from the concept of welfare, but it's pretty much a form of welfare. And in the leveling of the classes, we also need to stray away from just considering it by our own state or our own nation. We should consider it as a global citizen, whereas much of the world lives in absolute poverty, and bringing them out of that incredibly lower than low class would be much more beneficial than lowering the upperclassman's position.
Okay, so on that point, there's a statistic that's been floating around recently that 50% of people in the US are below the poverty line. I'm not really sure what sort of poverty line that is, because that's so crazy that one of the richest countries in the world, if not the richest country in the world, 50% of the people are under the poverty line. And you know, a lot of those people have TVs and cars, and that's just sort of a weird thing to think about, that that's poor in a lot of Western societies, whereas in a lot of other places in developing countries, the poverty is so horrible. And I think that, you know, the money that the wealthiest people have is put to much better use with private philanthropy and trying to help those people who have so little than to have the government take it and sort of put it into leveling within that one society.
So yes, you're basically anticipating the next question that I was asking, which is, should philanthropy be mandated in a judicial sort of way as welfare? If we see ourselves as global citizens, so let's go beyond the sovereignty of individual states. Let's go at worldwide institutions. Should worldwide institutions that, especially from a political perspective, are developing recently, should they implement laws worldwide? Of course, we think of the United Nations. That's open to debate. Should they mandate for citizens from a global perspective to lift the poorest? Of course, this statistic seems quite interesting. We need to see what the poverty line is considered with regards to the United States currency. And of course, we know that if it's regarding those criteria, 50% in the States, it's going to be drastically higher in many other states. It is a very interesting statistic, though. So the question is, to go back to the question, and I think that this should be the last question inside the topic, then we can sum it up. What do you think? Do you think philanthropy, do you think welfare from a sort of monetary perspective should be mandated by states, international institutions, or should be left to individual choice and private entities?
Okay, I think that before we go into that question, or not before, but it's really difficult to look at that question and not go into the positive and negative duties of an individual towards others. If the philanthropy would be considered a positive duty because it's the duty of helping others, those that are the poorest of the poor, the ones that are worst off, to kind of rise them up and use what we have to help them. But then there's negative duties as well, that are duties not to harm. And one could very well argue that the system in place today, the free market capitalist system, is actually harming those of the poorer nations and is the cause of their misery and actually makes them worse off than if the system wasn't there at all. So what doesn't make sense to me in terms of philanthropy is, wow, okay, so I'm getting rich by participating in this global system of injustice, and but I'm going to use that money that I gained by hurting you to help you and raise you up so you can participate in the system as well and continue in the cycle of hurting others. So that's my opinion.
Okay. I think you have a lot of good points, and I agree with you on a lot of that. I think part of the problem with the states being involved in that is that the states are often they don't do it very well, sort of generally. That the U.S. gives a lot of money to developing countries and various sorts of foreign aid, but it does that and sort of pushes its own agenda while it's doing that. And I think that's a huge problem that can often be avoided by private charities, because I think a lot of private charities are much more concerned with actually helping the people than states are. So I think while it would be nice if we could get a lot of the money that is in wealthier countries through the government to developing countries, that would be really great, but I don't think that that's necessarily the best thing as far as a long-term goals and long-term effects. I think that private charities and philanthropy usually does that a lot better.
Okay, so of course this touches, and perhaps we will talk
So
about
many
it
points.
on many other points, which is the speed of parliamentary procedures as opposed to the speed of private sectors in decision making, which was also a big factor in the financial, if you consider the recession a financial systematic crisis. Now, to sum it up, what are your opinions on the initial question? Let's try and give an answer of your opinion, and what do you think at least should be considered as we make a decision? Should states use taxes as a mean to level patrimony or opportunity across society? Go.
Okay,
Let's go in order.
I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so I think taxes that level in order to create more equal opportunities for everyone are great, but leveling for the sake of leveling isn't good.
I agree and disagree. I think that definitely taxes on patrimony, on things that aren't even being, on like property or whatever, things that aren't cash that isn't tangible, all of that is still wealth, and that should be taxed to raise equity, as you said, equality of opportunity. We want everyone to have the same chance to kind of eliminate that luck, or that, I keep going to the phrase, arbitrariness of fortune, I really like it, to kind of get rid of that and make sure that everyone has the same chance. And that includes leveling. So you can't have equity without a certain kind of leveling to an extent.
All right. I believe in the patrimonial taxes as well, but I don't think I believe in it as a form of leveling, and more so than I believe in raising up the lower classes. I don't believe in bringing down any classes. I don't believe that would be right. I know that luck may have gotten them there and corruption may have gotten them there, but it's also those positions that keep people going and keep people working in hopes to attain those positions and to be successful in their mother's eyes and just various forms of human conditions. But I I believe that focusing on ourselves as global citizens and helping the rest of the world and raising the rest of the world out of poverty through maybe the U.S. Agency for International Development, which I totally support, USAID, that would be the better option. I don't believe in leveling per se.
Good. So I think we get a good sense of what.
Wait, I think we should ask you, what do you think?
Yeah.
Yes.
My opinion, I'm in a very, I'm in a big state of confusion with the part of my life. So I'm still debating to myself whether leveling for the sake of leveling could be justified. Sometimes I find myself thinking that it could. Because what you guys just said raises another question, unfortunately, which is, isn't wealth and the distribution of wealth across society in the world relative? Bringing up someone might have the same effect of taking down someone from up above. So my opinion is that a state that holds conditions of democracy, so holding those conditions of representation, should be the entity that has the function to, of course, guarantee equity, but perhaps there is a strong, and I take the perhaps away, there's a strong correlation between leveling classes and leveling equity in itself. There's a big correlation. So sometimes would it be just to level classes for the sake of increasing equity? I leave you guys with this question. Thank you very much for listening. Now we're going to forward now the discussion to our blog, which is GygesEthics.wordpress.com.
Not .org, .com. There is a WordPress.org, but we are the other one.
Yeah,
.com.
we're the better one.
There are links on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, so if you look down
and our
below,
Twitter page,
and everything. So.
Especially, so if you go on Facebook /GygesEthics, same applies to Twitter, you can find us. And of course, the most important thing is our YouTube channel, where you'll find this video and the next episodes. If I could make some suggestions, it'd be very interesting if the next discussion that we'll see online, the sort of extension of this discussion, will expand on the last questions that we mentioned, but we weren't able to go through. So the fundamental premises of entitlement to the property we come into the world with, whether equity should be the priority, whether leveling taxes as a mean to itself is justified, and which entity should guarantee this. Private sector, individuals, or the state. Thank you very much for listening. We are Gyges, Ethics and Current Affairs, and I hope that you guys keep an eye on us through the months. Thank you very much.